Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Friday. It's such a treat to be hosting the Friday Daily Huddle. Tara and I are normally on Wednesdays. Before we get started, Tara, I was thinking I might go and I loved waiting tables when I was in college, and I might go get myself a job. I did. I loved it. I might go start to wait tables again.
Come
I
on.
I would bring a lot to the table.
So funny.
Yes. I actually did like waiting tables. It was fun. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle, where we are going to talk about leadership today. We are standing in for Gio and Sorrel, who are traveling, and we're, as always, going to bring our spin, relationships and communication, to leadership as we answer the question, what does leadership mean to you? But before we get started, we always love to start with our questions so that we can get ourselves grounded. And I see Rashida in the room. Rashida, I would love to hear from you today. How are you and who are you going to hug?
Are you called upon me?
I did. I wanted to hear your beautiful voice.
Good morning. Good morning. And your question is where I am?
How are you and who are you going to hug?
I am fantastic and blessed. And who I'm going to hug today? I'm going to hug a friend of mine that I'm taking him to do surgery. So I'm going to hug him before he goes into surgery.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rashida.
Okay, thanks. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you. And I'd love to hear from you, Virtue. Let's see. What would I like to ask you? How are you?
I'm blessed and happy to be here.
Good.
I'm doing well. I can't complain. I'm in good health and good strength and happy to be here today.
Wonderful. And where are you, Virtue?
Well, right now in Florida, I'm visiting my mother.
Wonderful. And you're also right here with us on the Daily Huddle.
Yes, and I'm right here with the Daily Huddle.
That's lovely. Thank you, Virtue. All right, Tara, the last one's for you. What time is it?
Kathryn, as they say, there's no time like the present. The time is now.
That's right. And as we do this every single time we're on, it never gets old for me because it is such a reminder that we are here and now. So I invite all of you, whether you're listening to the recording or you're here with us today live, be present, be here and now. You can suspend all of your thoughts and to-do lists and other things you're doing for 30 minutes while we dive into this conversation about what does leadership mean to you. Take us away, Tara.
I love it. Thank you. That was a great reminder because I'm going to start us off with a story, and I'm going to take myself back to this story. And it's a story of failure. But before I set up the story, I do want to make one statement about leadership. Many of us think, well, I don't lead a team, so I'm not a leader. And I push back on that mindset to say that we are all leaders. If we have the ability to influence any single human being, we are leaders. And that means that we're all leaders because we all have that ability. So I want to keep that in the back of our mind. And then I'm going to move into my story of failure. So I'm going to take us back to when I was working as a national sales trainer for a corporation. And I was in this role about 6 months when our company was bought by a big venture capitalist. Okay. So all of a sudden, the VP of sales was out. There was new CEO. Everything was kind of, everybody was on high, super nervous and anxious. But I was too naive to be nervous and anxious because I'd only been in corporate about 6 months. And it was time for the National Sales Convention. And I had a little part in the National Sales Convention where I took the stage and I spoke to about 350 people, most of whom were my colleagues from around the country. I'd built connection with them, relationship. I had some respect because of my success. And I took the microphone and I dove into a story. And the room went quiet. And the audience was truly enwrapped with my story. It was unexpected. They weren't used to it. They trusted me, and they were intrigued. And during the time when I was telling that story and making a point that I hope would inspire the sales force, the new owner was standing in the back of the room, and he leaned over to the general manager and he said, "There's your new VP of sales." Well, the general manager pushed back and he said, "She's not ready." He said, "She's the one. Surround her with good people and put her in the role." So about a month later, I was named VP of sales. And all of a sudden, 12 sales managers, all men, were reporting to me. And quite frankly, they were pissed. Who is this person right out of the field? You know, I used to report to one of them not too long ago, has been named not only our boss, but our boss's boss. They were not happy. So you may be thinking at this point in the story, okay, then you ruin things by laying down the gavel and laying down the law and trying to be tough and staunch. And that's not what happened. What happened was I brought my same voice that I've really been more discovering today than ever before to 12 men that didn't understand my voice. Super visionary, super creative, not a lot of particles in place. And that's not what they were used to. They had spreadsheets to manage. They had budgeting to take care of. They had to forecast. They were under so much pressure. And here I came with big, beautiful, visionary ideas that I wanted us to implement. So not only were they pissed, but they were confused. Now, one thing has served me through my career, and I'm grateful for this. During those very difficult months, many of the people that surrounded me said, "It's not your fault. You know, you were put in an impossible situation. You were given a title that they feel like wasn't earned." And people tried to pat me on the back. And fortunately, I've never, ever, ever blamed my inabilities to succeed on anybody else than myself. And I share that today because when I look back, here's what I've learned about leadership. And I wasn't learning it in the moment. I was just so frustrated and so confused. I'm so full of love, so full of listening, so full of giving. Why aren't they responding? And maybe a little bit of it was that they were pissed, but the bigger part of it was I didn't meet them where they are. I didn't seek to understand what they faced, the pressure that they were under. I didn't look at any of that. I just came in wanting to serve them in my way. And what I really needed to do first was to understand their way. And so I'm sure, like all of you, we've learned many lessons about leadership, but that has been one really clear message to me going forward, that the way that I see things and the way I communicate it does not necessarily align with the people to whom we're communicating. And that does not make for good leadership. So that's my one message about what leadership means to me, is to seek to understand other people's journey before we try to even serve them or help them, is to seek to understand.
Mm-hmm. How do you do that? Where do you start? If somebody is like, I thought I was already doing that.
Mm-hmm. I did think I was doing that. And what I've learned, like probably now so many more years later, is, and this is going to sound odd, Kathryn, but I was raised to always listen first, ask the questions. I was raised so much to really kind of seek to understand that I forgot about myself. And what I mean by that is I didn't understand my own leadership voice and personality. I didn't understand that it was confusing to people, that it sounded idealistic. I mean, I kind of earned this Pollyanna type name. And until we understand the way that we communicate, that's part of understanding others, is to shine a light on the differences.
Mm-hmm. So how do we learn that? If that's the first step, how do we learn that about ourselves?
Well, there's tools out there. There's so many tools. As a matter of fact, the one that I'm working with, I've mentioned to you recently, and I'm happy to put this in the chat, is something called 5 Voices. And it has really, really empowered the way that I communicate, the way that I work as solo, and the way that I work in leadership settings. But there are all kinds of tools out there to really help us to understand. First, there's a saying with this organization, and it's know yourself to lead yourself. Mm-hmm. And we have to know ourselves first. And so what I would recommend is diving into some tools. And there are many out there, but I'm happy to, toward the end, I'll share in the chat how to learn what your foundational voice is through 5 voices. So I say do the work. That's how we learn it.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I learned, just like you have, I've learned what my voice is. I've learned the way that I can best communicate, and I'm really positioned and aligned to do that. And now I've got, it could be a team of people, but I find children are a really great example of how do we lead, right? Because they won't mince words, and they'll tell you where you're falling down. But how then do I start to step into somebody else's shoes and see what they need?
Well, it's funny that you bring up being a parent, because as I was thinking about the leadership conversation this morning, most of us look at leadership as the ability to influence behavior. But then we look at sometimes as being a parent as being more of a dictator. But at the end of the day, even children that are under our roof have a choice. There's consequences to their choices that they're not in control of, but they too have choices. And so I think that in order to remember how we might come over to other people is to do the same thing that I understand, that I mentioned, which is that seeking to understand, that there has to be a balance of both. Has to be an understanding of where someone's coming from. And I think like a ... side lesson is stop doing what you've always done. It's so easy to react in the way that we always do and to say to ourselves, oh, that's just how I am. I just get used to it. That's one thing I love about our friendship, is that we're never going to be like done, like stick a fork in me. This is how I am. We want to keep learning and growing and getting better. And as long as I can keep doing that for me personally, I can keep growing and getting better. And that's, part of it's just doing the work.
I think one of the things is also sometimes when we listen, I think about salespeople and what the traditional sales methods sometimes are taught, is you listen. And how can you then angle your sales pitch that you already have in your mind, or the message you want to get across? How can you angle that now towards the person knowing that answer, as opposed to really listening, looking for resonance and dissonance? What's landing here? What are they really saying? What are the words that are not being spoken? And speak to that, even if it changes what I was going to say or what my outcome might be.
Right.
Because I think then you can really learn about a person instead of having my fixed notion of, I think this is going to go this way, I'm going to take us this way. I'm listening and let it influence the moment and be flexible and see what's really there and what's really wanting to emerge.
So wise. And you and I have talked about this before, especially in a sales setting, but really in any setting. Asking someone for their perspective or their concern or why they're not aligned, that first question almost never gives us the truth. Almost never. I mean, this even relates to children. Interestingly, I spend the mornings working on my book, and I was just writing about a moment where Holly was yelling about all that she had on her. She was in high school and there was just so much on her. And I was pushing back in my typical way. Things could be worse, blah, 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 blah. And finally, she admitted what really was bothering her. And she finally said, after complaining about a plethora of things, everybody else's mom helps them and I get no help from you. And she didn't lead with that. And I think it's still a lesson in leadership.
Yeah.
That's really how she was feeling, but it took a while to get to that.
And that points to the other thing, because the question is, what does leadership mean to you? And you said something early in the conversation about, and maybe it's about 5 voices, about leading yourself. What was the saying?
Know yourself to lead yourself.
Right. So what does leadership mean to you? And for me, it is, I have to start with myself first. I have to do the work on myself first. If I want my team to be more communicative, or my son to share more about his emotions versus having a tantrum, I've got to do that first, vulnerably and authentically. I can't expect my team to go do a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not willing to do, or that I'm not willing to model myself. So I think that to lead yourself first before you attempt to enroll a team.
Yeah. It's really empowering, and it helps us to do 2 things. It helps us to know how we're at our best, but it also helps us to know how we might be at our worst.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give a kind of a cool example. I may have told you this before, but in learning my voice, it says that my weapon, like when I'm at my worst,
Mm-hmm.
is when I explode in emotions,
Mm-hmm.
just like lose my, you know what.
Yeah.
And when that was first said to me, I was like, that's not me. Like, I don't really act that way. And then the guide told me, he said, well, first of all, it's not typically when you're mad at yourself. It's when you're mad that your values have been threatened or someone you love is being threatened. That's when you're, and it's usually those two things that can cause you to explode. It could only be a few times in your lifetime, but you have that ability to just bubble up and completely lose your stuff. And then I started smiling and I said, oh, I have a few stories for you.
I was thinking about, you told me a couple of those. It's like, actually,
yeah. There have been those times where I have just completely gone off the rails. And it was typically fighting for my children, particularly Caroline.
Yeah. I think the other important message here too, and I think it is vulnerability. And we talk about it a lot, especially on our, about relationships and communication, because it's so important there. But I think most people can smell a fake. They can feel it, they can sense it, whether they can put words to it, I don't know, but like we can all tell if somebody's not being genuine, not being real, or if they don't believe in the vision that they're sharing. If I'm trying to pull one over on my son, you can better believe, that he is going to figure out a way or not be aligned with it, so it's so important. I think that's the know yourself part of the phrase, know yourself to lead yourself. It's like, I got to know what I stand for. I got to know that I'm standing behind these words, that I mean this, and that I'm willing to go to bat for it, to your point. Like, I am willing to, this is what I stand for. And people, because, we've seen those leaders, people follow that energy and that passion because they just are drawn to it. They want that. They want to feel connected to another human being.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have kind of a question about a philosophy around, and it really relates to vulnerability. Some leaders believe that they should shield their team from knowing their pressures. So you could take that same conversation into being an entrepreneur, into being a parent. You should shield them from knowing your pressures. But I think when we do that, that's when we're not vulnerable. That's when we try to push on something that doesn't feel authentic. So I believe that we should share our pressures.
Yeah. Well, I agree to a degree. And, but here's the thing is, one, let's say I don't share anything. I mean, people can feel it in the room. When you walk into a room and somebody's just been in an argument and nobody's saying anything, like, you can feel it. Yeah. So people are sensing and feeling all the time. I think I heard recently we take in 10,000 pieces of information, every whatever second, minute, whatever. So like our brains are always taking data in and sorting through it. And so whether we're saying it or not, it's there. Now, what I would say is I have experienced leaders, kind of going too far. You know what I mean? And even parents doing that, saying like, this is so hard. I can't believe it. Like, have you ever had somebody, well, here's an example of, let's just say somebody who makes a lot more money than you, as a boss, like as a, one of your higher ups, right? And they come and they start complaining about money or their big renovation project. And oh my gosh, they can't, and you're just struggling to like, wow, put things together. Like it's like the tone deafness in the conversation. So it's know your audience. Sure. I think share for sure, but don't put the burden on the person, say how awful it is. Just like, hey, just, so I think there is a balance. And there's some boundaries. Like, as a parent, I'm not going to sit around and tell my kid, like, you don't know what it's like to raise you. It's so hard. I don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to turn out. Like, awful, right? Like, what kind of pressure does that put on the kid? But I might say, sweetheart, I got to tell you, I've got a lot of work pressure and I've got a lot of stuff I've got to do for you and your brother. So yeah. And I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm stressed. So if I'm angry or seem stressed, it's not about you, but I do feel the pressure. I think that's okay.
Yeah, I guess it's definitely nuanced. As a matter of fact, I have a good friend whose daughter to this day has not forgiven her for sharing something that she says just
was a burden, became a burden.
Yeah, it was a burden for years and years. And she just went too far with trying to explain why she was making the choices that she was. So certainly, yeah, a nuance there. But so then tell me, how do we remain vulnerable without sharing things that potentially could have negative effects on the people that we're attempting to lead, and not related to children?
Yeah, although I think it could be. I mean, one, I think we have to know that we don't know, we may cross that line. So we're not going to be perfect about it, because something that you do share could land on somebody, children or adult, that hits them in a way based on their experience, in a way that you don't intend. And so that's where I say, stay in the conversation and clean up the impact. But how do we share vulnerably? I think for me, I'm like, look at my intention. What is my motivation behind sharing this? Am I doing it to educate and inform so that the room is clear and the energy is light, and that we can be in the same conversation and understand one another? For me, that's a clean intention. If it's because some other, like I want to get you off my back, or I just, something that's not truly aligned with who I am, then I would question, is that really what I want to share? And how much?
So I'm feeling that. I think the takeaway, especially, go back to the beginning of, what does leadership mean to you? I want to hear what it means to other people in just a minute. But for you, I think it's combining your wisdom with your vulnerability. That's what I'm hearing from you, which, I'm always completely enwrapped with your wisdom. And yeah.
I love that you say that, because it is a balance between confidence and vulnerability. If you show up to your team and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And
no.
Right? Like, that might be vulnerable, but boy, that's not going to instill, and you might not, and that might be okay in a particular moment. But if you keep saying it and you really, it's like, how am I supposed to, so it is a balance between confidence and vulnerability. I know what you're good at and claim it, and be that and do that, and know what you're not. And so, yeah, I think it's a flow. And I also think trying it, being willing to quote fail or learn, however we're going to look at that, and read the room, see how it lands. Is that the impact I wanted to have? Pay attention. And if not, how do I clean this up? Or what can I do differently next time?
So what you're saying, really, it goes right back to really the same thing that I was saying from the beginning, was to be confident about what my gifts are. But what I needed to do all those years ago was to get the people to help me with the things I was weak at, the details, the structure, the organization. I needed to get those people to help me with the areas where I wasn't strong, and still not lose my confidence in these big, beautiful ideas that I have.
Right. Yeah. You have to equally claim the parts that are your strengths.
Yep.
And you have to claim your weaknesses, because when we try and hide those weaknesses, that's the stuff people feel. I'm saying I'm confident. I'm really confident. I'm really confident. It's like, why are you saying that? People sense it all the time in so many ways. And so it's also a reason to be like, why bother pretending?
Right. I'm laughing because I'm thinking back to that role. And I remember this so clearly. The CFO took a book, I swear, called Excel for Dummies, and slammed it on my desk. And I'm like, no, I'm a word person. No Excel for Dummies. I think I used that for kindling.
Oh my gosh. Love it. Well, there's a lot of good stuff in the chat. We only have a couple more minutes, but I love what Florence said when we should share the victories of the lessons, which I think is so important. And that is something really important to share, that say, and like, I'll narrate with my son. I don't know that we do this necessarily in the work setting, but hey, here's what's going on, and here's what I learned about that. That's something that I think is really important, to share that. So yeah, I am curious if anybody who's listening has a something that they want to share about what leadership means to you that might be different, or even a little bit out of the box.
And you probably see while we're looking for a question, I'm not completely right here right now, because I'm looking for the link that I promised to share. So
yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat.
I'm going to find that real quick.
I love that Tom raised his hand, because I was actually going to call on you. But Tom has had so much experience in leadership roles. I'm going to unmute you. Tell us what it means to you. You're on mute, so you might want to unmute yours. There you go.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, first time caller on a Friday. Good morning. I was listening to you all talk, and The self-awareness and so much of what you're saying is the communication. I always like to mention the military side because I think there's an impression that in a very regimented organization, such as the military, there is not a need to have really fulsome two-way communication. Mm-hmm. And I think what I've learned over my years in the Marine Corps, and then I try to apply it in my civilian career and in any relationship, the military allows you to do that at times, but to have a really effective team, you have to have an established two-way communication, a two-way relationship where the other person, no matter what role they are, what level, if they're peers, if they're three people down in the organizational structure, mm-hmm. they have to feel heard, appreciated, and also have the benefit of an explanation. Why are we doing this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've been overseas in some very challenging, intense situations and not having the opportunity to explain it right then. But as soon as I can to explain, this is what we're trying to do, mm-hmm. and help everyone understand the big picture. And then that also helps pull them in and gets the benefit of, their own observations and ideas. And so, having learned that years ago and then trying to live by that aspect of effective two-way communication, no matter, whatever the relationship may be.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Tom. It's the enrolling part, it's not the dictating part. It's like, here's the vision, and how do I bring these people along with me towards the shared vision? And they may not agree always, but they do need to, and so how do you, I love that. Thank you.
And knowing the purpose, that's, really a great reminder.
Yeah.
Yep. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We also have, I don't know who this is. Who is Samsung?
It might be Cece.
This is Cece.
Oh, of course it is. Hey, Cece. Yes.
How are you guys doing? I loved it when there was a comment about sharing the victory. Mm-hmm. What I'm a leader, and I'm grateful that I lead people to lose weight. And sometimes the victory isn't right away. So I'm learning how to declare my victory before it shows up. Mm-hmm. And I do times share the situation. That is just a problem. But I also share the victory before it even manifests. So that's what I'm staying present to, is sharing the victory, because I know there's an end date to everything. Trouble don't last always. So I say, as a leader, it's okay to share from the victorious side, not from the victim side. So that's what I'm learning to do, is to share the victory and declare the victory, because it's coming. We just don't know the date. So thank you so much for this topic. It's been really enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Cece.
So smart. And I heard two things in there. I also heard celebrate the small victories. If you're headed towards this big victory and it's not here yet, what are the small ones along the way? And then step into where you want to be and act, live from that energy, because you, like you said, it's coming. That is confidence for sure. And Chase.
Grand day, everybody. I study leadership every day for at least a half hour to an hour in one part of my day. It's just my habit at this point. And what I find interesting about leadership is that some people don't ever find the voice that speaks to them. So as a leader, I lead bands and I lead people, give vocal instructions and so on and so forth. And I'm always amazed at how some people will fight to keep where they are, even though you're giving them a space. Like, well, this is what I always do. And I go, okay, well, have you tried this? No, it doesn't seem like it's going to be comfortable for me. Okay, so would you rather stay in the mud, or would you rather come over here where the water's clear? Try it over here for a little while. This is kind of hard. And then you don't really get into that space with them. Also, I find that people use you as the model and say, well, I can't do what you're doing. It's like, I'm not asking you to do what I'm doing. I'm asking you to do what you do at an optimal level, not, at this one space. And I remember when I was with this company, they said, wow, Chase, you're a great speaker. You have this information. You like being on stage. It's great. Here's the problem. When you meet people and you want to talk to them about these things, they're going to look at you as the model. And not everybody's a good speaker. And not everybody wants to be on stage. And not everybody wants to give the information out. So you have to lead in a way that allows them to be comfortable to come inside of your world so they can get something from it. And I was like, oh, that's a freaking explosion in my head. I didn't think about that way. Like, wow, how do I do that? Well, you gotta bring it down a little bit. You gotta not be like full force. You gotta say, yeah, come on in, have a seat, relax. I'm gonna show you some things. That was hard for me.
Thank you, Chase. It's so close to what you were saying, Tara, about meet people where they are, you know, and like see. So, wow, that's great. Thank you all. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here with us today as we explore, a topic that's so in our realm and yet a little bit outside. So, Tara, close us out today with our 7 tenets, because it's so, I love how they apply to no matter what the topic is. It's just how we be.
Yes, you know, one of the first books I ever read on leadership was Lead with Love, L-U-V. It's about Southwest Airlines. And let's start with love, because that, I think, really, truly, you know, I believe it trumps all. So don't forget to go out there and love as you lead today and give. Be generous with your vulnerability, with your gifts. Know your strengths. Be generous and give. And remember to take care of yourself. Let yourself laugh. Don't take yourself too seriously. Make sure it's fun. Laugh and get your sleep. Eat your plants. Stress less. And don't sit at that desk all day. Let's move that body.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you all next week on the Daily Huddle.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
For attending the show.